Lauren Bennett stood at her kitchen window watching the rain hammer against the glass while her husband David packed his suitcase upstairs for another business conference in Portland. She loved David deeply after 8 years of marriage, but lately their life felt like a comfortable routine without surprises or passion, just weekend hikes through the same trails and movie nights on the same couch in their quiet Seattle suburb. David came downstairs with his roller bag and kissed her forehead, promising to call every night before heading out into the stormy evening. Lauren settled onto the couch with a glass of wine and a book, trying to ignore the restless feeling that had been growing inside her for months, when a sudden knock on the door made her jump. She opened it to find Tyler Grant, their ridiculously handsome neighbor from 2 houses down, standing on her porch, soaked from the rain, and holding what looked like a tangled mess of leather. He flashed that easy, disarming smile that always made the neighborhood wives do double takes, and held up a vintage brown leather jacket. "Hey, Lauren, I know this is weird, but I just bought this jacket at that antique shop downtown, and the belt is completely twisted around the buckle," he said, his green eyes sparkling with amusement. "I've been fighting with it for 20 minutes, and I remembered you mentioning you used to work at that boutique in college, so I thought maybe—" Lauren laughed and stepped aside, gesturing him in out of the pouring rain. "Of course, come in before you catch pneumonia over a belt." She took the jacket from him and immediately saw the problem, as the stiff vintage leather had somehow looped through the ornate brass buckle in an impossible knot that would take patience to untangle. They moved into the warm glow of her kitchen, and Lauren spread the jacket on the counter, starting to work the leather carefully while Tyler leaned against the island, watching her with obvious appreciation. "You're a lifesaver, seriously. I was about to cut the thing off," he said, grinning. "That would have been a crime. This is beautiful craftsmanship, probably from the 40s, Lauren replied, focusing on the stubborn buckle while very aware of how close Tyler was standing and how good he smelled, like rain and expensive cologne mixed together. As she worked her fingers carefully through the twisted leather, Tyler moved closer, supposedly to see better, and his hand brushed against hers, sending an unexpected jolt of electricity through her body. He glanced up and found him staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "I have to confess something," Tyler said, his voice dropping lower and more intimate. "This isn't just about the belt, Lauren. I've noticed you for a long time. The way you garden in the morning, the way you laugh with David on your porch. I've wanted an excuse to talk to you alone for months." Lauren's heart began pounding as she realized this innocent favor had suddenly shifted into something entirely different and dangerous. "Tyler, I'm married," she whispered, but she didn't step away, even as his hand moved to her waist, steadying himself closer. "I know, and I've tried to ignore this, but standing here with you—" Pause, his eyes searching hers. "Tell me you don't feel this too." The truth was, Lauren did feel it, burning through every rational thought about her marriage, her vows, her safe, predictable life with David. The belt hung forgotten between them as Tyler's other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek with agonizing tenderness. "We shouldn't," Lauren managed as she leaned into his touch, her body betraying every word of protest. "I know," Tyler whispered back, before closing the distance and pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that ignited every suppressed desire Lauren had been burying under years of routine. What started as one impulsive kiss exploded into desperate passion as they stumbled from the kitchen, knocking over the forgotten jacket, Tyler's hands tangled in her hair, while Lauren pulled him closer, feeling more alive and breathless than she had in years. Every touch felt electric, every whispered confession between kisses carved itself into her memory as they moved toward the bedroom. The rational part of Lauren's mind screamed that this was wrong, that she was destroying everything she'd built with David, but the fire Tyler had sparked drowned out all reason. As the night unfolded in tangled sheets and whispered promises, she knew nothing would ever be the same.
The morning after shattered Lauren's world as sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, illuminating the reality of what she had done. Tyler had left before dawn with one last lingering kiss that still burned on her lips, and now she sat alone, surrounded by rumpled sheets that smelled like betrayal and expensive cologne, staring at her wedding photo on the nightstand. David's smiling face in that picture seemed to accuse her from across the years, and Lauren felt physically sick as guilt crashed over her in waves. She stripped the bed with shaking hands, throwing everything into the washing machine, as if she could somehow cleanse away the evidence of her infidelity, along with the memory of Tyler's touch. But she knew it was already burned into her mind forever. The next few days passed in agonizing slowness as Lauren tried desperately to act normal when David called from Portland, asking about her day and telling her he missed her. She lied smoothly, saying everything was fine, that she missed him too, while her stomach twisted with shame at how easily the deception came. But even through the crushing guilt, Lauren couldn't stop thinking about Tyler, about the way he'd made her feel desired and alive in a way she'd forgotten was possible. She caught herself staring out the window toward his house, replaying every moment of that forbidden night and hating herself for wanting more instead of wanting to forget. Tyler texted her 3 days after their encounter, just a simple, "I can't stop thinking about you," that made her heart race and her hands tremble. Lauren knew she should delete it, should block his number, should confess everything to David and beg forgiveness. But instead, she found herself typing back, "Me neither," and watching those 2 words condemn her further. They began meeting in secret, stolen afternoons when David worked late and Tyler would slip through her back gate like a shadow. Their affair intensified quickly, fueled by the dangerous thrill of almost getting caught and the intoxicating chemistry that had exploded between them that first rainy night. Lauren became someone she didn't recognize, a woman who lied to her husband's face while counting down hours until she could feel Tyler's hands on her skin again. She invented errands and appointments, creating elaborate cover stories while the guilt ate away at her insides like acid, but never quite enough to make her stop. Tyler pushed for more time, more risk, more of her, and Lauren found herself addicted to the intensity he brought into her gray suburban existence. He made her feel beautiful, passionate, desired in ways that her comfortable marriage had slowly let fade, and she craved that feeling like a drug, even as it poisoned everything good in her life. David came home from Portland with flowers and her favorite chocolates, wrapping her in familiar arms that suddenly felt suffocating instead of safe. He noticed nothing amiss, kissing her sweetly and suggesting they plan a weekend trip to the mountains like old times, completely oblivious to how his wife had shattered their vows. That night, lying beside David while he slept peacefully, Lauren stared at the ceiling, consumed by self-loathing. She loved her husband, had built a life with him based on trust and partnership, but she'd thrown it all away for passionate encounters with a neighbor who offered nothing but temporary escape from her own restlessness. Tyler texted again at midnight, "I need to see you tomorrow," and Lauren's thumb hovered over the screen, torn between desire and conscience. The rational choice was obvious: end this affair, confess to David, accept the consequences of her betrayal, and try to rebuild what she'd broken. But as she glanced at David's sleeping form and felt the familiar comfort that had somehow become insufficient, Lauren realized with horror that she wasn't ready to give up Tyler yet. The fire he'd ignited still burned too hot, the memory of feeling truly alive still too intoxicating, despite knowing it was destroying her marriage from the inside. She typed, "Where and when," sealing her fate further into deception. Lauren Bennett had become a cheater, and the worst part wasn't just the lying and the betrayal. It was discovering that some dark part of herself didn't want to stop, even as everything she valued crumbled around her, built on a foundation of secrets that grew heavier with each passing day. 3 months into the affair, Lauren's carefully constructed lies began showing cracks as David started noticing small inconsistencies in her stories and the distant look in her eyes when he spoke. He asked if everything was okay, if she was happy, if their marriage needed something more, and each gentle question felt like a knife twisting in her chest. "I'm fine, just stressed about work," Lauren lied smoothly, while her phone buzzed with another text from Tyler hidden in her pocket. David accepted her explanation with a concerned kiss, offering to take more responsibilities around the house to ease her burden, and his kindness made the guilt almost unbearable. Tyler grew bolder, suggesting they meet at hotels instead of risking her house, wanting to take her away for weekends, claiming he was falling in love with her. Lauren felt the affair spiraling beyond her control, transforming from physical passion into something deeper and more complicated that terrified her. She began pulling away from David emotionally, unable to be intimate with her husband while carrying on with Tyler, the deception creating an invisible wall between them. David noticed the change, trying harder to connect with romantic dinners and surprise gestures that only made Lauren feel worse about the double life she was living. One evening, David suggested they try couples counseling, mentioning he felt them drifting apart and wanted to strengthen their marriage before any real damage occurred. Lauren agreed outwardly while internally panicking, knowing a therapist might uncover truths she wasn't ready to face. The counseling sessions forced Lauren to confront uncomfortable questions about what she truly wanted from life and marriage. She found herself unable to articulate the restless dissatisfaction that had made her vulnerable to Tyler's attention, realizing she'd been blaming David for her own internal emptiness. Meanwhile, Tyler pressed harder for commitment, suggesting Lauren leave David and start fresh with him, promising passion and adventure that would never fade. But faced with actually ending her marriage, Lauren hesitated, recognizing that Tyler represented escape, not necessarily happiness. She began seeing her affair clearly for what it was, a symptom of her own fears about aging, settling into routine, and losing the excitement of her youth, rather than any real failure in David's love. Tyler had simply been available and willing, offering validation she'd been too insecure to find within herself. The weight of maintaining 2 relationships exhausted Lauren physically and emotionally as she scheduled secret meetings around marriage counseling appointments. She lost weight, stopped sleeping well, and jumped at every unexpected phone call, terrified her worlds would collide. David grew more worried, suggesting she see a doctor and taking over even more household duties, while Lauren felt increasingly suffocated by his unconditional love. She didn't deserve his care, his patience, his determination to save a marriage she was actively destroying behind his back. Tyler sensed her withdrawal and became possessive, showing up unannounced and sending increasingly desperate messages demanding to know if she was choosing David over him. The affair that had felt exciting and liberating now felt like a trap she'd built for herself with lies and selfishness. One afternoon, Lauren's phone died during a counseling session, and she borrowed David's to call for a prescription refill, accidentally leaving his messages open. Time seemed to freeze as David's face transformed from confusion to understanding to devastation. He handed her the phone wordlessly, his hands shaking, and Lauren watched 8 years of trust shatter in his eyes as the truth she'd hidden crashed down around them. "How long?" David asked, his voice barely a whisper. And Lauren couldn't find words adequate to explain the inexplicable, couldn't justify the unjustifiable, couldn't take back months of betrayal. She confessed everything through tears, watching David's heart break in real time as each detail landed like a physical blow. She asked why, asked what he'd done wrong, asked if their marriage meant nothing, and Lauren had no answers that wouldn't sound like hollow excuses. David left that night, throwing clothes in a bag and walking out without looking back, while Lauren collapsed on the floor, surrounded by the ruins of everything she'd destroyed. Tyler called, but Lauren didn't answer, finally understanding that he'd never been the solution to her problems, just a destructive distraction from facing herself. She'd sacrificed a good man's love and a solid marriage for temporary passion that left her empty and alone.
David moved into a hotel, refusing to see Lauren or answer her desperate calls, while she remained alone in their house, haunted by memories of both her husband and her affair. She reached out to Tyler, seeking comfort, but found his passion had cooled significantly now that the thrill of secrecy was gone and real consequences had arrived. Tyler admitted he'd enjoyed the excitement of their forbidden relationship, but wasn't actually ready to be with a divorced woman who came with complicated baggage and a destroyed marriage. His rejection stung worse than Lauren expected, revealing that she'd thrown away everything real for something that had been mostly fantasy and ego. Lauren's friends and family learned about the affair through David, who needed support to process his pain, and suddenly she found herself isolated and judged. Her sister, Rebecca, came over and delivered harsh truths about selfishness and how Lauren had taken David's love for granted while chasing validation from a man who'd offered nothing substantial. You had everything, a man who adored you, stability, partnership, real love, and you destroyed it because you were bored, Rebecca said, without sympathy. Now you have nothing, and you did this to yourself. The words cut deep because they were absolutely true, and Lauren couldn't hide behind excuses anymore. She'd convinced herself the affair was about passion or connection, but really it had been about her own insecurity and fear of becoming ordinary. David finally agreed to meet after 2 weeks, and Lauren saw how much damage she'd caused in the hollow look behind his eyes and the way he couldn't look at her directly. He said he needed time to decide if forgiveness was even possible, asking how he could ever trust her again after months of elaborate lies. "Every time you said you loved me, every time we made plans for our future, you were sleeping with him," David said, his voice breaking. "How do I believe anything you say now when you looked me in the eye and lied so easily?" Lauren had no defense, no way to undo the betrayal, no words that could heal what she'd broken. She whispered apologies, begged for another chance, promised she'd ended things with Tyler, swore she'd do whatever it took to rebuild trust, but David just shook his head sadly. "The Lauren I married wouldn't have done this, wouldn't have thrown away 8 years for excitement with a neighbor," he said, standing to leave. "I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't think you do either." After he left, Lauren sat in the coffee shop for hours, staring at nothing and confronting the reality that she'd become someone she despised. The affair had revealed character flaws she'd ignored: selfishness, impulsiveness, a willingness to hurt people who loved her for temporary satisfaction. She started individual therapy, determined to understand why she'd made such destructive choices, and her therapist, Dr. Morrison, pushed her to examine the deeper issues beneath the affair. Lauren realized she'd never developed a strong sense of self-worth outside of male attention and validation. "You used Tyler to feel desirable because you stopped seeing yourself as valuable," Dr. Morrison explained during one session. "But external validation is temporary, and you destroyed something permanent chasing it." Lauren began the painful work of facing herself honestly, acknowledging that her marriage hadn't been lacking. David's love had been. She'd just stopped appreciating it. She'd taken his steady devotion for granted, assuming it would always be there while she explored whether something better existed. Tyler tried contacting her a few times, suggesting they could still see each other casually, but Lauren finally recognized him for what he was: an opportunist who'd pursued a married woman without conscience. He'd helped destroy her marriage, but she'd been the one who'd opened the door and invited destruction inside. Months passed with no word from David, and Lauren focused on becoming someone worthy of forgiveness, even if she never received it. She volunteered at a marriage counseling center, helping others avoid her mistakes, and slowly began rebuilding her sense of self-worth through helping others. She wrote David a long letter, not asking for reconciliation, but taking full responsibility for her choices and acknowledging the pain she'd caused. She explained she understood if he never forgave her, that she didn't deserve his forgiveness, but wanted him to know she finally understood the magnitude of what she'd destroyed. "You deserved better than what I gave you," Lauren wrote through tears. "You deserved honesty, loyalty, and appreciation for the good man you are, and I failed you completely because of my own brokenness." She mailed the letter without expecting a response and continued her therapy, continued her volunteer work, continued trying to become someone who wouldn't make the same selfish choices. The guilt remained heavy, but Lauren was learning to carry it as a reminder rather than letting it destroy her further.
6 months after David left, Lauren received an unexpected response to her letter, a request to meet at a neutral location to talk. She arrived at the park where they used to hike together, finding David sitting on their favorite bench, looking older and sadder, but also somehow more peaceful. "I've been in therapy too, trying to understand how I missed the signs, how our marriage fell apart without me noticing," David said as Lauren sat down, keeping distance between them. "My therapist helped me see I'd gotten complacent, taking you for granted in different ways, assuming you'd always be happy with comfortable routine." Lauren started to protest that none of her betrayal was his fault, but David raised a hand, stopping her. He explained he wasn't excusing what she'd done, but had come to understand that their marriage had developed problems neither of them addressed before she made her devastating choice. "You should have talked to me about feeling restless or unfulfilled instead of having an affair," David continued, his voice steady but pained. "But I should have noticed you pulling away, should have asked deeper questions, should have worked harder to keep passion alive in our marriage." They talked for hours about their relationship, about where it had failed, about the lies and the pain, and whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage. David admitted he didn't know if he could ever fully trust her again, that the betrayal had fundamentally changed how he saw their history together. "Every happy memory is tainted now, wondering if you were already unhappy, if you were already thinking about him," David said, and Lauren saw the lasting damage her affair had caused. "I can't just forget that you chose to hurt me repeatedly for months." Lauren didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't push for reconciliation, just listened and acknowledged his pain, accepting responsibility without deflection. She told him about her therapy, about discovering her issues with self-worth and validation, about finally understanding she destroyed something precious because of her own brokenness. "I learned that I was looking for someone to make me feel special instead of learning to value myself," Lauren explained, her voice thick with regret. "Tyler was just a symptom of me not knowing who I was outside of being wanted by men, and I destroyed our marriage figuring that out." David listened carefully, and Lauren could see him processing whether her growth was genuine or just manipulation to win him back. Watching him, she assured him she expected nothing, that she was changing for herself, not to earn her way back into his life. As the sun began setting, David stood to leave but paused, looking at Lauren with complicated emotions crossing his face. Hesitating, "I don't know what our future looks like or if we have one, but I appreciate you finally being honest, even if it's too late." Lauren nodded, accepting his uncertainty, and watched him walk away, possibly for the last time. Lauren had learned painful lessons about taking love for granted, about how selfishness destroys trust, about how temporary excitement never compensates for permanent damage caused. In the following months, Lauren continued her personal growth, working with her therapist and helping other couples navigate marriage problems through her volunteer work. She shared her story honestly in support groups, warning others about how easily one bad choice could cascade into catastrophic consequences. David reached out occasionally, brief messages checking in that gave Lauren hope without promising anything. She didn't push,
didn't demand, just responded honestly, and continued proving through actions, not words, that she'd changed fundamentally. What Lauren learned from her devastating mistake was that marriage required active effort, appreciation, and honest communication rather than complacency. Understanding finally, she'd learned that external validation was empty compared to genuine self-worth, that temporary excitement without substance was worthless, that betrayal destroyed not just relationships, but your own integrity and self-respect. The affair with Tyler had promised freedom and passion, but delivered only pain, isolation, and shame. David's steady love had seemed boring until she destroyed it, and realized too late that reliability and devotion were precious gifts, not limitations to escape. Whether David would ever fully forgive her remained uncertain, and Lauren accepted she might live with the consequences of her selfishness forever, accepting reality. But she was determined to become someone worthy of forgiveness, even if she never received it, to help others avoid her mistakes, and to never again take genuine love for granted in pursuit of temporary thrills. The educational truth embedded in Lauren's painful story was clear. Marriages don't fail overnight, but through accumulated neglect and unaddressed dissatisfaction. And when facing restlessness, the answer is honest communication and personal growth, not betrayal. One moment of weakness sparked by a simple belt had ignited a fire that consumed everything she valued, teaching her that some mistakes leave scars that never fully heal, and some trust, once broken, can never be completely restored, no matter how much you've changed or how deeply you regret the person you became in your moment of selfish weakness.